Welcome back. Here we are at it's part 2, session 2 of today, our final day of the CCA Retreat 2021. I'm here with my co-host, Leslie Robb.
Woo-hoo! We are literally at the home stretch of an amazing retreat.
I will say, yeah, there was a lot of information and great stories and a couple of games this morning that we played, but we have a lot in store for you this afternoon. So
yeah.
All right. We're actually, you know what, Leslie, we're going to just start off right away. So because we have an action-packed afternoon. So
yeah. We want to get it done.
Let's get rolling. All right. Today with us, just your average, everyday, run-of-the-mill writer, performer, singer, songwriter, ventriloquist, comedian, entertainer, rock and roller, blogger, political observer, author, puppeteer, pianist, entertainer who works in every possible venue for every imaginable audience. That's all. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. Seriously, though, is there anything this man can't do or hasn't done? He loves to make people laugh and has been blessed to be able to perform, are you ready? 200 to 300 dates every year.
Wow.
Yeah, even during the pandemic. He's managed to pivot and adapt to the situation in amazing ways, capitalizing on the virtual corporate meetings and providing entertainment even in those settings. Ever since he won Star Search, there's a hint for you, the predecessor to America's Got Talent, for those of you who are too young to know or too old to remember. He's been in great demand all across the U.S. and all over the world. He combines comedy, ventriloquism, I was so afraid I was going to mess up that word, and music to provide appropriate entertainment for everything from tailored corporate presentations and commercials to Carnegie Hall, from Second City to churches to Disney cruises. We're so happy to have him today. Please welcome Taylor Mason, everybody.
Woo-hoo! Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, Leslie. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to start. I'm just going to kick right into this thing. And for everybody that's watching, great. That was such a nice introduction. Sounds so much better than reality, but I'm going to accept that. I'm just going to jump right in and what I want to do is, if possible, inspire you, motivate you as we go through what we're going through pandemic-wise, maybe show a little bit of the process of how I work and talk about my overall modus operandi, how I make things happen. So we'll start with that, especially since we're people of faith. The book that I constantly go back to is the book that I found my favorite to be when I was about 13 years old at a Presbyterian church in Clarendon Hills, Illinois, and Reverend Burton and my father were talking. They did not know that I was in the bathroom. I was in the bathroom stall in the men's room in the basement at Presbyterian Church in Clarendon Hills. And Reverend Burton said to my dad, whatever you do, do not let Taylor read the book of Ecclesiastes until he gets out of high school. That is not something he should be familiar with until he's at least 18 years old. So, of course, I went home and devoured the book of Ecclesiastes, which is my favorite book in the Bible to this day. What profit hath a man for all his toil in which he toils under the sun? Basically, all is pointless, all is futile, vanity of vanities. And I think that applies directly to how we're living right now, because there's always going to be, there is always a series of obstacles that we have to go through, particularly for people who are in performance, whether you're working in churches or secular world, whether you're doing TV shows or church basements, whatever you're doing, there are always obstacles. There's always this sense of what's the point? I'm never going to get through this. And we as people of faith and as entertainers, especially now, have to fight through that. And we have to find a way. I guess what I'm saying is, regardless of the situation, there has to be a way for us to find a way to work. And in so doing, we're going to help people. And if that's just through laughter, I think that's a good reason. But obviously, comedy and performing comedy has so many benefits to it. And as Rhonda was saying during my introduction, I've done a ton of Zoom shows. Many of them were for free. Many of the programs I've done over the last 16, 17 months, I have not been paid for. Well over half. I have not been paid for those performances. Why would I do that? Because my job is to be funny. My job is not, I believe this sincerely, my job is not to worry about how much money I'm making. My job is to get better as a performer and work. So it's very Ecclesiastes based. Right. The whole point is, what's the point? In the end, it doesn't matter. The fool and the genius basically are the same when we die. Everything, all of us are basically the same in the end. My job is not to worry about what audiences think or what people think. My job is to bring as much joy, happiness, lightness to a really dark world. The pandemic to me has been a very biblical, this is the most biblical portion of my life. And I've gone through recessions and, lots of crazy political stuff, personal stuff, family stuff, the same thing everybody else has, same thing you have. I'm no different than anybody else, but my outlook has never changed. My job is to be funny. My job is to please people. My job is to make as many people happy as I possibly can. And in return, my faith is very strong, and I have great faith in my faith. And in the end, this is all going to work out, even the pandemic. We'll start at the very beginning of that. So what is my job? To be funny. So that means that every day I try to write jokes. So I live at the beach in New Jersey. So today I've tried to come up with something just off the top of my head as I'm walking on the beach, jogging with the dog. This morning on the beach, people were collecting shells. And so my thought was, when I was a kid, there was a thing about when you listen to a shell, put the shell up to your ear, you could hear the ocean, right? So in nowadays, with the way cell phones and phone calls are, it's almost like a cell phone. You hold the shell up to your ear and it would say things, press 1 to hear the sound of the Atlantic, press 2 to hear a toilet flushing in Minuchin, whatever. Okay, so that was my first joke of the day. Again, I'm not saying that I'm a genius. I'm not saying that everything I write is perfect. It's not. What I do is I just write jokes. Summer is another time for blockbuster movies. That's a great, I think, as I'm walking, I'm just thinking of stuff of blockbuster movies in the summer. What are they? They've got lots of special effects, mega superheroes, and actors who play superheroes. And those actors all have a superpower of their own, which apparently is to star in a bunch of sequels and prequels every summer thereafter, each declining in quality until finally nobody will even watch the free version on YouTube. Again, I'm not saying that I'm a comedy genius. I just put my mind to it, and these are things that I wrote down as I'm walking the beach in New Jersey this morning, because that is my job, to write jokes and then put the jokes out on stage, try the joke out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't stay in the act. I will say this after the two that I just told you, or these premises or whatever. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Nobody cares. Ideas are free, basically. So why not just come up with as many ideas as I can, put them out there. And I honestly would say, if I'm lucky, if 1 out of 10 jokes work. And if they don't work, I just don't put them in the act again. If they do work, awesome. I've got another joke for the act. I do this regardless of where I'm working. So if I'm doing a big corporate gig and making a ton of money, I still write stuff for that group. Even if in the live context of doing it, it doesn't get a laugh. You're doing the National Roofers Association and you write some joke about roofers falling off the roof or, getting stung by bees, whatever it is that you write. Maybe it doesn't get a big laugh. The point is not getting the laugh to me. The point is I took the time and made the effort to find something that can relate directly to my audience in those corporate events. And so I write it, I put it out there. I'm never bashful about that. I wholeheartedly believe and have great faith in my faith and what I do, that I'm going to be able to win the audience over, if no other way than just by being myself. And I'm going to figure out a way to please these people no matter what. And it's not always easy, I agree, but it comes back to Ecclesiastic. Yeah, it can be really futile. Get over it. You're going to have to figure out a way to win people over. I think even right now, maybe more than ever for us as live performers or television or video, whatever, maybe more than ever, our skill sets as comedians and entertainers and performers and people who bring joy to all ages, for us, this is a great time. And I believe that sincerely. I have great faith that this is a great time for us to be working. And I know, and this dates back, this is throughout my entire career. So if you look back 10, 11, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, the recession, I worked a lot. And why did I took a lot of jobs that maybe other people wouldn't take. I did a lot of one-nighters for low money. You know, Taylor, why are you working for $100? Because I'm working. My job is to work. And not every job is going to pay me everything that I want. But I need to be in front of audiences. And in order for me to do what I do, I have to work a lot. I have to perform a lot. How that relates to the pandemic is very simple. I just took on a ton of Zoom shows, these kind of live, you know, and recorded performance pieces online. I just took on as many as I could, regardless of the money, because I need to get better at it. I need to see how I look, how it's going to play, how I'm going to talk. Comedy, as you guys know, stand-up comedy is really hard to do in a remote virtual setting like this. I understand. So the only way to get better at it, even though it's really hard, is do it. But it's too hard. Yeah, it is too hard. Figure out a way to find what I do and apply that directly to whatever the audience is. And I will say this, that I've added stuff that I never thought I've added. I started doing magic tricks. Why would I do that? You know, it's not something that it's not in my wheelhouse. Why would I do that? Because I found that magic was, you can still do all your material. You can still do all your jokes while you're making a mask disappear into a thumb tip. All right. Or you're making a card disappear and then appear where, you know, the people are watching. They pick out the card from their deck, you know, however you do that. And then I can still use all my material and put it in there. And all of that kept getting me work throughout and to this day continues getting me work throughout the pandemic. Another thing I wanted to talk about with the pandemic, and this is my opinion, but I believe this sincerely. I think it's time for us as live performers to stick up for ourselves. So if you've been booked, and what I mean by that is, if you've been booked for a show, if you've been booked and the client comes back, whether it's a comedy club, a church, a faith-based organization, a corporation, a Kiwanis club, whatever, and they come back and say, we're very worried about having a live entertainer, we're worried about people getting COVID, we're worrying about people not showing up because of COVID. My opinion on that is, work with people. Look, would you consider a whole series of things? Would you consider doing half an audience? Would you consider having everybody, you know, when they come in, answer a couple of questions? Have you had COVID? Do you know anybody who's had COVID? My feeling is there's a way to work this out. And we, as live performers, I believe this sincerely, we have to stick up for ourselves. We've been going through this now 17 months. Okay. So it's a lot. We've been out of work, many of us, a lot. So I think there comes a breaking point, and maybe this is it. Maybe this is the point where we stick up for ourselves and we tell people, look, I understand you're scared. I understand that you don't want the community to think that you're having a super spreader event. So what can we do? You and I, you, the person who booked me, and me, the performer, what can we do to make this date work so we can honor the deal that we had and make as many people happy as possible? And I've already done this a couple of times where a 500-seat theater, you know, the guy called and says, I don't know if I can do this. My question back to him, were you expecting to sell out? And he said, no. Great. Why don't we just do let's tell people it's a half a house. You can only do 250 people. Is there any way we can make that work? So I honestly believe this. There's a way to make these things work. And a lot of that is faith-based. A lot of that is spiritual, but a lot of it also is just us sticking up for ourselves. Okay? And I honestly believe that we have that right. We've earned that over 17 months doing whatever we've had to do to get through. So I'm telling you, that's just the way that I'm working right now. And if that helps you, fantastic. Another really important thing that goes along with that is there's really good people I work with. So I work with a guy named Tim Grable. Tim does a great job of representing me. And we've been together for 20 years. He's very devout, just a very good guy. And we are very open about what we think and how we operate. So there isn't a date that we take on. What big company, small company, church basement, comedy club, 200-seat room, 100-seat room, 50-seat room, doesn't matter. We discuss all our options on all of these. How can we make this work? What's the best thing we can do for everybody involved? I think that's a huge thing. And I've been very lucky, but it's really more than luck, because it's a lot of people that I've worked with over the years. I've only had 4 people who, quote unquote, handled my career over the however many years I've done, 100 years. I don't know how many years I've done this, however long it is. And I've worked with all these guys, starting with a man named Joey Edmonds, who, God rest his soul, no longer with us, a great guy. I worked with him for almost 20 years. He and I did well over 2,000, maybe 2,500 college gigs around the United States of America, a bunch of corporate gigs. Great guy. We saw eye to eye. He was very positive and always had good advice. And he ended up giving me, handing me off to another really good person named Rick Rogers, who had worked with a lot of much more talented, a lot of celebrities, big time comedy and music acts in his career, based in Los Angeles. Great guy. He taught me a lot as well. He's kind of Joey Edmonds times 5, just because of his contacts. And again, I don't handle anything different. I didn't handle anything different with Rick than I did with Joey. Just a good person. He was Jewish, very devout, great guy, worked really hard. The first time I auditioned for the Disney Corporation, he had me go into an office with 3 Disney executives, and I literally did my show, a 40-minute show for 3 executives in a little office. And that didn't pay off. This is so interesting. That did not pay off when we did it in, say, 1993 or something. But then 10 years later, the same people are talking about working with me on Disney Cruise Line. So just by meeting those people, working hard, making it, finding a connection and networking somewhere down the road, 8 years later, that paid off. Rick got out of the business, moved away, and I started working for a short time with a man named Stan Bernstein, great guy. And that led to working with, meeting Bill Gaither. Bill Gaither through Danny DeArmas and Ken Davis, who spoke here yesterday, just incredibly great people. Ken and Dan were very instrumental in my life, the way things have gone, because I started working with them right around just before 9/11. And then when 9/11 happened, I was, even though the college market and a lot of comedy clubs dried up, I started working with Bill Gaither and touring with the Homecoming Artists, which was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. Bill's obviously the best boss I've ever worked for. The people on that tour were and are just amazing. And that led to a whole bunch of other jobs. And when Danny DeArmas, who has handled my career for maybe 2 or 3 years, booking me, giving me advice, working with me, same with Ken Davis. When Danny decided to get out of that aspect of his career, he's now a pastor, he turned me on to Tim Grable, and then Tim and I picked up where I'd been going. So by working with all these people, really great folks, since, say, 1985, 86, that's been a huge blessing for me. And I've always had great faith that everybody I work with, all the people that I'm doing stuff with, all of them are affecting me in generous ways. All of them have given me really good advice. All of them know exactly where I'm coming from. They've watched my kids grow up, go to high school, graduate from high school, graduate from college, etc. So I've been very fortunate in those things. And I would hope that for you as well, because surrounding yourself with good people, and a lot of times comedy acts, ventriloquists, whatever, we're thought of as these loners out, on the road doing our thing, but it's really not true, because wherever we go, we're dependent on sound people, light people. That's one of the weird things about doing these virtual, because I've had to do my own sound and lights and makeup, stuff that I'm not used to. My eyebrows look so weird. Where's the face enhancer on here? I've had to do all that on my own, and yet I've had all these people, even just setting up for this today. I had a couple of people with sound, making sure everything was working the right way, that we had video and sound. So I'm never really alone. And that goes back directly to my faith. I'm never alone. I never feel lonely. Christ is always at my side. And I believe I have great faith in my faith. This all relates directly back to how I work, my modus operandi. And if there's one thing I'm going to leave you guys with, if you're a comedy performer, if you want to work in comedy, if you want to work in show business, if you want to be a person of faith going out and sharing your gift, you have to work. You have to work. I have to work. I have to work. I have to work. I have to work. It goes through my mind all the time. I've got to find a gig. I've got to find a gig. And if that's free, online, doing children's hospitals, then that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work free online doing children's hospitals. I'm going to find a way to do what I do. And that all is not futile. All is not vain. All is not pointless. There is a reason we're here. And I have great faith in the fact that what I do and the way I do it, this is going to work out in the end, even in the midst of a pandemic. And I think that's the same for you guys. I think that you can find a way to work. I think there's some way, somehow you can find whatever it is that you do. You'll find an audience. You'll find, whether it's remote or live, wherever it is, online, in a bar, in a restaurant, in a church basement, you can find a way to work. The more you work, the better you'll get. The better you get, the more you're going to work, and you're going to get paid. I believe all those things. And the proof of that, I would say, is the fact that I'm still doing this, 1983 till now. So 38 years I've been somehow been making a living doing whatever it is that I do. Okay. If I didn't even think if anybody has questions, you can shoot them at me right now. I don't want to go over my time too much. I will say one more thing. I'm not. Sometimes we are put in the position of we're competing. You feel like you're competing with celebrities, or you're competing with other comedians, or you're feeling like you're competing with maybe. I always feel like I'm competing with myself. And to be more specific, when this goes back to when I was in college, I always felt as a college football player I was never very good, but I never had to be. I never had to be a star. I never had to be the best player on the field. All I had to do was on this one play, on this one moment, I have to be the best player on the field. Just this one play, I have to be the best. And I feel that affects me to when I work now. I don't have to be the best comedian. I don't have to be Mark Lowry. I don't have to be Jeff Dunham. I don't have to be Tim Hawkins. I don't have to be Jeff Allen. I have to be the best there is right now going on stage at the Clearfield County Fair or in a church basement or wherever I am. I have to be the best right now for this X amount of minutes. And then when that's done, great. Maybe I'm the 1,533rd best ventriloquist in Illinois or wherever. That's fine. But tomorrow when I work, for that, whatever time it is, when I go on stage or go in front of the camera online, I'm going to be the best there is for that given amount of time. And I have great faith in my faith that that's going to happen. Okay, I don't want to go over my time. If there are questions or anybody has anything they want to say, do it now because I got to walk the dog.
First of all, Taylor, just thank you for sharing, just your process and, bringing up the point that you are never alone, that it's Christ by your side, that I think that's something that we need to take with us. All of us, we need to know that we're not alone when we're doing this, besides, of course, connecting to the community that we're in. We need to know that, Christ is by our side. And you also brought up that we need to work, no matter what that looks like, that we need to get out there. We need to practice. There's times that, you said you donated a lot of your time to like children's hospitals. And I think that's amazing. And that helped you to get better.
Oh, yeah. Our job is getting the next job. The job really comes down to, it's very Ecclesiastes based. Our job is get the next job. How am I going to get the next job? I don't know. Work equals work. Grable, I call this the Grable Method. And I think there's a lot of truth in it, which is, okay, it may not be the best gig. It may not be the most high paying gig. It may not be, the most sophisticated gig there is. It may not be the most, the audience might not be, 5,000 people paying $300, whatever, or $30 a ticket. But work always gets more work, whether it's just because I put a new joke in the act, or I did a new routine, or I practiced some aspect of my live performance. Regardless, that work is going to always relate somewhere down the road to meeting somebody, making a connection, networking, and that will lead to another job. I believe that with all my soul. And of course, I just have great faith. I pray before every show. My prayer is never, let me just do a killer show tonight. My prayer always is, let me do the best I can. Let me flow and let everything kind of happen in the best way possible for me for this next X amount of minutes.
Right. Well, we're there like, there to serve the audience and to glorify God. And so I know, Taylor, you're busy, and we're so thankful that you took this time out of your day to be with us. And Leslie.
Yeah. I mean, Taylor, seriously, it's so funny about what you said, how you were just literally walking your dog on the beach, and then you thought of a joke, like just looking around, people picking up shit. I do that all the time. Like everywhere I go, I'm like, how can I make this funny? How can I make this fun? I do it all the time. And one of those things where you're like, I think it's just me. But no, it's nice to hear somebody else is just like that. Yeah.
You're right, Leslie. I keep notes. I have lots of notes. 90% of what I write, does never sees the light of day, but a lot of it does see the light of day, and a lot of that doesn't work. Too bad. And then, what ends up happening is you reach a point where you have so much content. So if you're working in I just finished my last week I was at a county fair. I did 18 shows in 6 days, 3 shows a day at a county fair, opening for, or whatever you want to call it, working with people who are on The Voice, people who are on America's Got Talent, people who are on American Idol. Well, yeah, I was wondering, where do those people go? Because it's like they do those shows and you never hear from them. Now I know they're at the Troy County Fair.
They're at the county fair.
And but I had to do all these shows, and the same people. There were some people who came back and saw all 18 of my gigs at these fairs, and I just used every bit of material that I've ever thought of, and I wasn't uncomfortable. It was never a situation where, oh, this is going to be awful. I've never felt that. It was like, how am I going to make what I do work for this on the 15th show, and this group is still here? What can I do? I'll do this. I'll do this. I'll try this. I haven't done this for a while. So in the end, all that work pays off. It may not seem like it to aspiring comedians or wherever you are in your career, but it's all going to work. The fact that you just stick with it, don't give up, great faith in Christ, keep going, make people happy, spread a lot of joy, especially during a biblical pandemic that we're going through now, more than ever. What we do.
Yeah.
You guys, I hear this is what I've been hearing. So I did the 18 shows a week for 2 weeks at fairs, and then a church in Arkansas on Sunday night. This is what I heard probably 12 times over the last 2 weeks. We really needed to hear you today. I really needed this today. I've heard that, and that's not. Now, it would have been any of us. It would have been any of the CCA people, family goes out, because what we do is really, I can't emphasize that enough. What we do is really, really needed right now. It may not seem like it. It may seem like, the end is near, but it is not all futility. It's not all pointless. We have to work. We have to figure out a way to get through to people doing what we do. Stick up for yourselves. Find a way to work with people.
Oh, thank you so much, Taylor. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to be here with us. We so appreciate it. And hopefully next time we see you, it'll be in person at the CCA conference.
Thanks for letting me be. And thank you, David Pendleton and Chris, all the people who made this possible for me. Thank you guys all, and everybody at CCA. Thank you all. God bless you all. Thanks a lot, guys.
You too, Taylor.
Bye. All right. You got to get to work now, Leslie.
Yeah.
But, you know somebody who got to work. I'll tell you somebody who got to work. That would be Mr. Mike Goodwin. He got to work. That one of our CCA own, right? Yes.
Woo-woo.
And he was on a little show called
Just a little.
AGT, and you might have heard of it before. And he is, he's a wild card. And what does that mean? That means he needs our votes.
Yes.
So we, one of the things about the CCA is that we need to support each other. And one of the ways we can support one of our own right now is by tweeting hashtag AGT Wildcard at Bowtie Comedy, and you can vote. And so share your votes. Get, everybody in your household who has a device, vote for Mike Goodwin. This is how I know somebody will actually put that as well in the comments, because we would love to see Mike Goodwin win America's Got Talent, and we definitely want him to go through. So we all can help out by voting. So there you go.
And he also said that, guys, to go to his page and share with people to vote. So.
All right. You heard that. Mike Goodwin. What is it? Bowtie Comedy?
Yeah, Bowtie Comedy on Instagram. And I think on Facebook, it's Mike Goodwin Comedian, I think. But either way, search Mike Goodwin, you'll find him. You can't miss him.
That's right. We definitely have to do that. So this next part is going to be pretty awesome. Are you excited about it? Because I am very excited about it. I know everybody who is with us is in for a treat, because we have an amazing panel coming up. And as a matter of fact, Leslie, why don't we introduce them? Go ahead, start off.
Sure. We have truly saved one of the best parts, even though all of them is best parts equally, for last. So this is our joke panel section, and we are going to introduce our panel. So our first up is a past president of the CCA from Nashville. He is highly respected and widely known in the Christian comedy community. We are so excited to have Rick Roberts on our panel.
Woo!
Thanks for having me along, y'all.
Woo, I'm glad you're here.
We are super excited you're here. And I'm really excited for our next panelist because she's definitely had input in my comedy career and has helped me and has brought a lot of women and other comics together. She's been spent the better last part of 25 years making people laugh as a professional comedian, whether she's performing for women's groups, conferences, or recovery groups, or emceeing events, producing shows, or raising funds for worthy causes. She delivers laughs that can lift spirits, open hearts, and leave us inspired. In 2016, the National Livin' on Laughter Gospel Comedy Association awarded Kay Dodd with their Lifetime Achievement Award. And she's previously been a club comedian. She was booked to host an MC for A-list headliners like Jeff Foxworthy, Shirley Hempel, Brian Regan, Henry Chow. Oh my gosh, I could keep going on and on and on, but we can't just make this all about Kay Dodd. Because we could just keep going on and on about you. We love you, Kay.
My goodness, the check's in the mail. It's a bad check, but I wrote it. It's in the mail. So good to see you guys and guy and ladies.
Yes, for sure. And our last panelist, last but certainly not least, whatever I'm trying to say, you guys know, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So our last panelist is not only a talented musician, but a fantastic joke writer. Whether it's one-liners for his tweet song or killer taglines or perfectly timed callbacks, he has a natural gift for comedy. He is another one of those multi-talented guys that is inspiration to us all. Welcome back, Mr. Johnny W.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
we
Good to be back.
We recognize you. You look like a guy that was singing earlier.
I was there. This is a different me, though. That was my worship me. I had my gravelly,
Right.
You can have the fog machine rolling in from the background to set the mood, the laser light show that we need for worship.
Yeah.
Is that your set list in the background?
His
It is.
to-do list is hilarious.
That's my.
Well, and to show the age difference between Johnny and I, he said this morning, he's like, I just thought I would go back. We can't put the words on the screen, so we would go back and do a classic. And he starts singing, and that was one of my favorite songs like 15 years ago. And I'm like, snap, I don't remember the words to that.
Oh,
And,
wow. Yeah.
but it was great. I love that song. It was such a great reminder. And I don't think I've ever heard you sing worship music, and that was amazing. So
I was in a band that traveled around. I was in a Christian rock band, and we did a lot of worship events.
knew
And
that.
people always go, you should do, like whenever they hear my comedy, they're like, you should do a record of serious songs. I go, you had 7 years to make me famous doing
Yeah,
that,
really.
and you blew it. So you got to take the comedy now. That's all I do.
Oh, that's so
See, I guess
funny.
you wouldn't be Johnny come lately in that area.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a bygone era.
All right, are you guys ready? Are you guys ready to
I
start?
guess so. Sure.
Because-
Hit us.
All right.
Are we singing? Is that what are we doing?
We have an opening question. If you would like to sing the results, you go right ahead. Feel free. But we want to grab the listeners, so
Okay.
you use your discretion.
Okay.
So to kick off, we're going to do it a little differently. If each of you could just share your joke writing process, that would be amazing.
Sure.
As a Christ follower,
All
and
at the
how
same
that
time?
would differ. Yes, we would like you to do it all. That way, it'll save time. Now, why don't you start off, Mr. Rick Roberts?
Well, I get up every morning and look around and look at the bubble gum and Bazooka Joe wrappers that I discarded next to my bed, and I find the best zingers and I try to put them into a story. Now, it's. I think we've covered a lot, even in these different sessions, how people kind of come about their things. My intent is always up. I'm trying to stay current. I talk a lot about my family. So, for example, this past year, I've kind of tried to I've got all the jokes about them being babies, being toddlers. Well, now they're 16 and 9. And I still have those jokes. And I'm talking to somebody in the audience that has a baby. I can still get into those jokes. But I want to replace big sections of my act with, current truths and funny punchlines to go with them. So, with my son's going through puberty. He's starting to shave and learning how to drive. Not exactly at the same time, but within the same day, he'll be doing those two things. And, and I even run it by him. I'm like, I want to update your jokes. You're not the kid, you're not doing those things that I used to speak about, but I don't want to embarrass you either. So I'll run the jokes by him, and he gives me the thumbs up on it. All my family likes to be talked about in the show, but I'm constantly looking at what's going on now with him, so you never want to have your act get older than you are. You want your act to definitely be fresher, younger than you are. So I just ask myself, what's going on in the house? What's going on? What's occupying my mind? What's taking up a lot of my time? And I try to write jokes around those things. And I also write all the horrible jokes that come into my head that I can't tell, but are still funny in a very dark way. And I'll write those so that I can look at those and maybe learn from the approach in those, or the surprise or the angle or whatever. But I don't start each day thinking, what are only jokes I can write for the Christian market, or only for the corporate market, or only for this kind of show. I just write whatever's coming across my mind, and then it's really deciding what audiences are best for those. And even though I'm a clean comic and I'm a Christian comic, I've got, a good 20 minutes of stuff I probably would never do in a church that would be perfectly clean, but that's not what they're expecting or anticipating or want or hire me for. But they work fine in a club, and the club wouldn't even notice anything. They wouldn't think it's edgy at all because I'm on the super clean side of whatever's going on in the club. So, it's all about writing all of it down, taking notes. And then, Johnny and a couple of friends here in Nashville, Brian, we'll get together this week and have lunch or a breakfast and kick around a few ideas afterwards at the office, or, just kind of run ideas by each other. We'll bring up some ideas. We each have about up to 12 minutes on each topic. We'll go around 2 or 3 times. They know my act. I know their act's really good. So they also know, like, oh, that joke would be good if you put it here or in place of that or right after that joke. And so having 2 or 3 buddies that are, pretty aware of your act and what it's like is super helpful to take what you've written, get some ideas even before you take it to the stage first time. So it's fortified with a lot of different angles, and then try it out. And then obviously record or really know how the audience reacted during your show and go back and fix what didn't work.
That's great. How about you, Kay?
Oh, exactly what Rick does. Johnny, how about you? Why did you let him go first? Because he's the teacher, he's the master of teaching comedy. So now I'm like, bleh, bleh, bleh. Well, for me, approaching comedy, the approach that I have is, coming up on, I'm the oldest one, I guess, on this panel, coming up on 60 years old. And I think it's cool that you pick two people on the panel that have the same birthday, because Rick and I have the same birth date, not the same year. He's much younger. But August 18th, don't write, just send money. So my thing is, and this is something I learned early on when I started comedy in clubs in 1991, is I learned the process of writing about myself, which is like what Rick said, his life. He's got kids now. I didn't have kids then. I have one child now, but I have four stepchildren. I don't know. I lose count. But the thing that I learned that I didn't do back then was to write true statements about my life and then see how those morphed into jokes. And so when I got into Christian comedy, because there wasn't anything left of the old act that I could use, that God, wouldn't smite me for, that I literally had one joke left, and it was about my name being Velva K. And so that joke has grown and morphed and changed over the years, but it's still there because my name is still Velva K. And, you can't outrun that or outdrink it. I tried both. So it's my AA story, wrong meeting. But anyway, so as a Christ follower, I have some hard things that I talk about, when I do a show, because they're true statements about my life. I didn't grow up in church. I did not grow up. I mean, I think I grew up in a Christian home. I always say I was raised Baptist alcoholic because Daddy was a self-professed alcoholic. He died of alcoholism when I was 14 years old. Mama had a black belt in Southern Baptist religion. I knew everything that was going to send me to hell. I didn't know anything that was going to keep me out of it. And so when I came to know the Lord myself, I was 40 years old when I really made that commitment. And, and so the lens changed, and I did not have anything. So I just had to spend time, first and foremost, cleaning up my my mind and my mouth. But that started with my heart, is to let God clean out the anger and the bitterness and the pain that was in there, which cleaned out the stuff that was as the Colossians, I think 3 says, the filthy language that comes out of your mouth. I literally read that scripture when I gave my life to the Lord. It was on the floor of Phillips Arena. It was at a Hawks game. It was a little awkward, but Jesus will get it done. But I gave my life to Christ, and 2 weeks later, the Punchline called and offered me all of this work with all of these great comedians, but they were all anything goes. I mean, it was like Pablo Francisco and several names I just don't even want to say. But I was like, no, I got to keep it clean. And if I'm opening for somebody that anything goes, I know I'll fall back into that. And I opened my Bible to Colossians 3:1 because I'm like, Lord, what do I do? And it says, put off the filthy language that comes out of your mouth. And I was like, so does that mean I need to say no? So over the years, that process has moved more toward true statements about my life. One of my favorite jokes in my show. Is it time? Is something going to explode? Oh, hey, darling. So school's out. One of my favorite lines is a true statement that I used to do jail ministry, but because I've talked about, my recovery story, the twist to that, and this was born in the moment on stage where I just really literally ran out of material and just said, I used to do jail ministry. And then in the moment of the pressure, I went right up till they let me out. I did that ministry for 3 to 5 years. And anybody that laughed at that, I was like, now I know who my people are. And so that's for me. And some people would say, well, that's, is a Christ follower? Yeah, Christ has got people in prison that know him really well now. They didn't before they got to prison, but now they do. And thank God he, saved me from going to an actual prison, but I lived in a lot of self-created prisons. So I don't know if that answered your question. I don't remember what the question was, but glad to be here. Glad to be sober. Love y'all.
I just love you, Kate. I have to say that, like, my first CCA I went to, which is the only one I've ever been to. Literally walking in that first night when I was so nervous, I had no idea where I was going, who I was going to meet. I didn't know anything about these people. And the first person I see is you, and you come and you act like you've known me forever, and you're smiling. It just made me all the more comfortable. So thank you.
You're so sweet. You're adorable. Okay, Johnny.
Oh. Well, I will say this. I've learned so much from being around the CCA comics. Rick has been a huge mentor for me. Kay, you're amazing because, like, you're right. I did not know your comedy until a few years ago. And when I saw you I think you were doing an opening set for Shonda. Mm-hmm. And I saw you talking about alcoholism and spousal abuse and all this heavy stuff. But it was so great because I was like, she's so funny. Like, it's making people address these real issues that otherwise would not be addressed in church. It's like we're able to be our real selves if you can just make it funny. And so I really love that. It really inspired me. I was like, man, she's a killer. Like, I couldn't believe how good it was. So Kay's awesome. Rick is awesome. And they know what they're talking about when they talk about jokes. I have a similar process. I go to a lot of open mics when I can. I try to work things out on stage these days. I used to kind of have an unwritten rule that I wouldn't say anything on stage that was not funny on paper. It was kind of an unwritten rule, which is a funny thing for a rule about not saying anything on stage unless it's funny on paper. But I realized that about 2 years into my show, I was like, I don't do anything until anyone could get out of the audience and just read my joke and it would still get a laugh. Like, if you ever look up Mitch Hedberg's jokes online and just start reading them to your kids, you will get a laugh almost as good as Mitch Hedberg would get with that joke. They're written that well. And I kind of had that weird standard for my jokes. And these days, it's not that my standards have lowered. It's that I'm trying to inject more of my personality into the show. And it's like the old thing of, like, some people say funny things and some people say things funny. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a spectrum. It's not one or the other. But I think I'm trying to get more of that side of myself that says funny things in a funny way. And so I have, like, little rules about things. Like, Tim Hawkins told me that early on the bus. He said, you know what you don't want your show to be. Like, he kind of realized that about me. And I don't know if that's good or bad. He just said, I noticed that maybe it can be a hang up because you kind of stilt yourself as far as writing. You're like, I don't want to turn into this guy. So you kind of stifle a part of your personality that would be a good thing to explore on stage maybe. But I do think it's okay to have certain, like, standards that, like, I know what a piece of writing in my voice looks like. And so one of the things I noticed early on from me, just as an example, is that I was afraid to make myself the dumb guy in my jokes. And I realized that it was because it took me years. It's almost like therapy when you're doing comedy because you're learning about yourself as you do it. And I realized I didn't go to college. And it was like almost I needed the crowd to feel like I was clever. Yeah. And so I was constantly trying to prove myself to a crowd that didn't know me, like I had a chip on my shoulder. And so I just wouldn't write jokes that had me not as the hero of the story. And what you end up with is a very, like, one-sided, snarky act. And the true thing is that what connects with a crowd is relatability, vulnerability, being the dumb guy. AKA Brian Regan, Jim Gaffigan, any great comic, most great comics, they come at life and they approach it that way. So I kind of have a rule that if I have 2 or 3 jokes in a row where I'm the hero of the story, I need to switch those around. I need to get rid of 1 or more of those. So that's one thing I do when I'm writing. One thing I'm really playing with now, and so this is kind of like, not to belabor the point, but one idea that I'm playing around with now is even if I have a negative viewpoint on something, I have a negative outlook in general in life. So I would call myself a realist, but really that's what pessimists say. So I try to make a overly positive point, even if I have a negative overall outlook in the joke. An example would be Demetri Martin has a bit that says, I think bumper stickers are a great time saver because it's just like a big sign that says, let's never hang out. Like, it's a snarky joke, but you're saying something positive about the bumper stickers. So you're setting up the crowd, even though you have a snarky thing. So one joke that I'm working on is like, my wife's a shopper. And when I come from off the road, like she'll hand me all these receipts and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea we were doing this well. And so it's just like a way of like sneaking in like a little bit of like a dig, but it's an unexpected, overly positive thing too. I don't know how to explain it, but that's just something I'm really playing with now, is like how to play with the personality of a bit. So
well, that's a perfect segue, because we're going to talk about the next section. The next question is bringing a joke concept and talking it through to becoming a joke. Like, how would you do that? So you have a joke concept.
Yeah.
And how, let's talk it through to becoming a joke.
Right here, live in the moment on YouTube.
We're going to do it live. So do you want to come up with a concept? Do you want me to?
I used to run a jail ministry. It says a callback.
Heard it.
For those that are listening.
Okay.
Well, I struggled with this one a little bit because and I meant to talk about this in that last little section. I have a real hard time, and I don't know if it's ADHD, I do write down premises. But for me to sit down and stare at a piece of paper and stare at a premise, and I doubt very seriously that that's what anybody actually does. But so I will write down ideas or premises or whatever. But I stay away from topical material because I'm lazy and I want my jokes to have a long shelf life. Like Rick said, some of his jokes from when his kids were babies, now he's got to update that. He can still relate to a crowd that has babies. And talk about when his children were little, but he's got to acknowledge, like I do a joke in my show about a question my daughter asked me. Well, she's 23 years old now. The audience doesn't know that because I haven't really set that up. I just say, she's very literal. So she asked, how did you get that water out of the washer and into the dryer to spin it dry? And I just let that sit there. And then I go, did I mention that I homeschooled her? But that puts it back off on me, that I'm the butt end of that joke. But my joke writing process is really on stage. And I mean that it's crazy, I know, but it's something that Rich Scheidner, who is a very great comedian from years and years ago, I'm sure Rick and Johnny know who he is, taught me that. He said the pressure of taking a premise on stage and bringing it up and talking about it, I then will sit down with it after whatever comes to my mind on stage. But it's just kind of hard for me to I keep hearing ringing in my ears. I don't know if Jesus is coming back. If I hear a trumpet sound, I'm
either that or it's DoorDash. We don't know.
Yes. So anyway, so the one thing that I have right now that I'm working on, I have had to make the switch, which is hard because I work a lot in most of what I do is in churches, and I do a lot of women's events where a lot of times women are dressed up, and I've had to make the switch to wear sneakers all the time, and because I'm old and I have a hip problem and I just need to be in sneaker. I have on high heel sneakers right now. I feel so special. So I literally have these sneakers that have a wedge in them. They have a star and they're really cute, but they're made by Skechers, which is like the nursing home shoe of America. And but they were marketed to actual tweens, like kids. And so a friend of mine said, they marketed that particular line to tweens. And the line that came out of my mouth to her was, well, I'm a tween. I'm tween 50 and 60 right now. And so that's the thing that I'm trying to, I have to address this early on because it's like the elephant in the room. She's on our stage in our pulpit with dress clothes on with tennis shoes. why is she doing that? So I have to address it. So if we can use that as a concept to work on, otherwise I'm like probably out of this conversation because it's just not what I do. So
Yeah.
No, that's a funny idea. I like the idea of that. Everybody's a tween. Everybody's between something. So
yeah.
a funny idea.
Oh, okay.
That's a great idea.
I like that.
I don't have anything to add, Kay. How can you add to such a perfect joke like that? How
Oh,
can you-
bless. Well, here's what they look like.
Oh, those are nice. Look
Aren't
at
they
that.
cute?
Beautiful.
Yeah, 60-year-old with high heels, tennis shoes on. There's
Come
just
on.
so much material in that in itself. So
That's good stuff.
So let's get the expert, Mr. Rick Roberts, to tell us about what we're supposed to do.
Well, I mean, I think it's smart to address anything that might be distracting to the audience. You know, what you say, I go back and forth between thinking that my first 90 seconds is super important, and then other times thinking it really doesn't matter because they're not dialed in for the first couple of minutes. So I think it's a great time to do something that's kind of a new little thought, because you don't want to put so much pressure on your first line and base your whole show on how to respond to it. So if I know that I came up with it, like you came up with this thing about your shoes on the way up, I'll just say a few things until I get a laugh and then go into my first bit. So it's almost like you're giving them a little, you're not inside a room until you open the door and go through it. They're kind of going through that door before they get to CK. And so whatever you're thinking. So just with what you've given us here, you've got Converse. Converse has all-stars. You could be a conversational speaker. You could be just shy of being controversial with your Converse. You have high heels. You don't have high stakes. It's you're not on the high road. I would look at these different little things that are just part of the shoe,
Okay.
And if you don't find anything there, you can. There's all the shoes that have ever been made, and that could be. I used to wear blank on stage, Puma or Nike. And I used to wear Nike on stage, but then I got all the letters from the kids that were making them, or whatever. Just whatever shoe controversy there is in the news. If there's something like that going on. There was a shoe bomber at one point. I would just think of anything that popped in my mind.
That's true. You could be a shoe bomber if your jokes don't work. You're a shoe bomber.
I don't want to be.
Boom, there you go. So I don't want to be. Hope you guys laugh at my Converse jokes, or else I'll be the next shoe bomber.
Yeah.
Some of us are at the age where remember Get Smart, and he would open the phone and talk to Chaos or whatever.
Oh yeah.
You're in church, so why wouldn't you be wearing sandals? Maybe it's like. You mentioned that.
That's true. You go the other direction. Like not only should I not be more dressed up, I should be less dressed up. I should have sandals on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why am I not barefoot? Because I didn't carry you down the beach. Somebody else did.
Oh yeah.
Whatever people think about feet and shoes.
Yeah. That's good. The other line that I have used is, I want to get this out of the way real quick. I know I'm standing up here and, on your church stage in sneakers. I'd like to tell you it's because I want to give you the illusion that I'm athletic. And they laugh at that. And I say, but it's orthopedic. And then that's when I go into the sketch, they're actually made by Skechers, which is the nursing home shoe of America. But they were made, marketed to tweens or whatever. So. Yeah.
And also, today I'll be telling you about my journey, and if you have to walk a mile in my shoes, I thought they'd at least be comfortable.
Yeah.
Good.
There's when you think about it, tons of references and cliches and thoughts about shoes and feet and all that stuff. So I would just, if I was writing this joke with Kay, we would just mine all that stuff for as long as we can. We might bump into a couple of puns, and we might embrace them or release them back into the wild, But in the writing process, we wouldn't say no to anything. And that's one thing I always wanted to get across to anybody who's trying to create is there should be no barriers, period, when you're creating. You have two sides of your brain, and if you don't know how it works, one is analytical and one is creative. The analytical part, we either do later on in the writing session or a different day. But when we're creating, we're not trying to say why it won't work or why it might not be good, or maybe somebody else has a joke like that. It's green light, 100 miles an hour, keeping that flow going. Just like in improv, we say yes to every idea and see if we can make it bigger, weirder, stranger, and see where that leads. Mm-hmm. We get all that down on a piece of paper or several pieces of paper, 2 or 3. When I write in the morning, it's usually 2 or 3 pages about a topic. And then I'll go back either the next day or later on in the afternoon when I'm in a different phase, and I'll highlight what I thought was kind of funny from the morning, and then I'll see if I can bullet point those and make that the starting point of a joke. And then once I get all those things highlighted, I look at those and say, what am I trying to say? And that will usually give me the premise. I'll start with a topic a lot of times. I won't have any premise until I get done expressing myself for 2 or 3 minutes. And then I always ask, what am I trying to say? Because if I don't know that, the audience will never be clear on my setup. And so what am I trying to say, and how short can I make that so the audience can follow where I'm going with this?
That's
good. Yeah, I like that idea. Somebody, I think an author friend of mine said that it's like when you're writing a first draft of a book, which is similar to us writing a first draft of our jokes. They think of it as just shoveling sand into the sandbox. They're not trying to build the castle yet. They're just shoveling all the sand they can into the sandbox. And then you build the castle. And then when you get in front of an audience, they judge the castle and tell you that it's garbage. So then you go wash the sand out of your crevices. It's wonderful. I don't know. The metaphor has been strained at this point.
Right. And when you said castle and sand, so here's an example of something that popped in my mind, and I don't know if I'm going to run with it or not.
Okay.
But my kids, she's going into 4th grade now, so she's into Minecraft, and she does Minecraft on her tablet. And it's pretty hard to sit there and say, "Hey, show me what's going on in your Minecraft world." But she shows me how she creates these things. And so, word for your word, yesterday I said, "What are you making?" She goes, "Well, I'm making a whole new world, and I've got this mansion in here, and it's got a moat, and look at all these cute little bunnies I put in here." I'm like, "Are you Hugh Hefner's daughter? You've got a mansion and a moat and bunnies." Like, in my head, I'm thinking this, but where do I use that joke at?
There's a grotto. There's
right. But
everybody's got smoking jackets and robes.
Is that in her life right now? She has no clue about any of that stuff, and she's just being pure, and she's making her Minecraft mansion that literally has a grotto. And so it's like, I don't know if I'll ever use it, but there it is.
Were the bunnies in the moat? Because that's kind of bad. They don't swim, do they?
Well, as my daughter said, they're very young bunnies, so I didn't even look at them. Didn't want to walk down that road.
Oh, well, and the thing I jotted it down because I said earlier that I don't write topical material, but I do write my experience with topics. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So like I don't, because anytime a new widget comes out, the new thing, it's a commercial or whatever. And Johnny knows because we sat here at a Chick-fil-A and he made me tell him some of my old club jokes. And I had to go back to therapy after that. But
at Chick-fil-A of all places, that's a double sin.
So, that's true. That's true.
The Polynesian sauce burns. What's going on?
Holy Polynesian sauce. So I used to do a lot about topical and what the commercials were about. And I just don't do all that anymore. But like I will do some stuff about essential oils. I don't sell essential oils, but I have used some of the essential oils. And I will talk about a friend of mine's like fanaticism with home health, or what do you call it, home remedies and stuff. Because she's like, "Oh, put apple cider vinegar on it," and I'm like, "It's my checkbook. I don't think that's going to help."
Right.
And so I wanted to be clear about that. So I will talk about something that is topical, but I still put myself and my experience with that product or whatever. But I still stay away from certain product topics there, Johnny. So.
Hey, I got it. That's good. No, I agree. It's easy. It's hard because it's easy to fall into that where you go, well, this joke. It's easy to think our jokes are going to last forever when you start doing this.
Yeah.
But comedy of all kinds ages very poorly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to remember that. Go watch 10 specials that you loved when you were 15, and I bet you that 9 out of 10 of them come off hacky now. And they wrote those jokes in the moment. They were amazing, but it's just audiences change, and we all change. It's a very comedy saturated culture now because people are like, I'm funny too. They can just get on Twitter and type responses to you in real time. So we have a more cynical audience, a more worldly wise audience. Even a Christian audience is not just getting their comedy from Christian comics anymore, which is why we need to be on our game, because they watched Gaffigan and Regan's last special too. They probably watched Chris Rock's last special. And so we got to bring it. And so, yeah, it's easy to forget that whatever you're writing that you think is so great is going to age very poorly. So you may as well just shoot for the stars.
There you go. And I just put them on my shoes, and there you
Yeah,
go.
that's right.
So there.
Well, I'll
Did we-
piggyback on what Kay said a second ago. Is putting yourself in the joke is extremely important, and it's I think Josh Novi asked, how do you differentiate yourself from other people? Especially Christian comics. If we're honest, if we had like a bingo card of topics that Christian comics are going to talk about, Chick-fil-A is the middle center square in that bingo card, and then there's 16 other. Every Christian comic does these jokes about this. So if you're still going to do a joke about those things, it needs to be 100% about you and your experiences through it.
Right.
And if you're always putting yourself in a joke, it always makes sense to the audience that you're telling this joke. If you don't, and it's just purely observational, you're taking a stab at something in pop culture, but it's not really from a specific point of view. It's just from culture's point of view. Even it kind of comes off flat compared to the other stuff that you're excited to talk about because you're in the joke. When I talk about my family, I literally I never blank out on stage to the point where I can't come up with what's next. I just picture my family portrait on the mantle. I'm like, okay, I haven't talked about my wife yet. Here's another 5 minutes coming this way, or and I'm always excited to talk about people that I actually know and who actually said something that I responded to, or I said something they responded to it in a funny way.
Yeah.
So look for yourself in the joke, and if it's not in there, simply ask the question, how would I handle this situation? I mean, any news story, whoever's the victim in the story or the oppressor in the story, how would you handle it? If you were the bystander watching the story, what would you do? And you can instantly put yourself into a joke, and your point of view comes across big to the audience that way. If you're just slamming somebody or taking shots at somebody, I don't think it resonates as much as if there's a reason for you to be talking about it.
We're going to do some questions and answers. Leslie, you're going to kick us off.
Do
All
it.
right, so the first one is, well, I guess technically the third, whatever, is how do you put a message into your comic?
Okay.
I'll say,
Okay, who wants to take it first?
Rick, you go. Rick,
I'll just go because I'll forget the question if I wait more than 20 seconds to answer it.
I forgot her message.
Honestly, I don't put a ton of message in the jokes. Depending on where the venue is and who I'm performing for, I'll put a message after I've done a ton of jokes, and I'll just be honest and frank with them. If it's a testimonial type situation or whatever, I'll separate that so they know it's different. I don't typically start and write a joke going, how am I going to put this in there? Now, sometimes clients, because they see a lot of my clips and go, you're a Christian, we would prefer, I actually had this conversation earlier today, if you don't mention politics or religion in your set tomorrow. It's a virtual event. And I'm like, that's their request. I'm going to honor their request. But I don't have a problem saying, I went to Cracker Barrel after church on Sunday last week, just to kind of leave the door slightly ajar for anybody that may want to have a conversation about something. But again, if I came into even a church event, if it's 60 minutes of nonstop messages in the jokes, they're going to, some audiences might want that. I think all of us need some of that, but I rarely start a joke from how can I get the message across in this joke, just to be 100% transparent with you. I think what I try to do is be a person on stage that they can approach and have conversations with afterwards. And sometimes bringing dark to a light place is a good thing. Show them where I've been a failure in my material. And the message there is that God made me whole again. So I might do it that way, but there's not, subliminal or sneaky ways of putting the God's message in the jokes. It's more about what's God done through my life to fix me from these situations that were comical now, but at the time, really bad news.
Yeah. I do all kinds of events, and most of them I'm brought in as do comedy. We have a speaker that's going to be like if I do a conference and they have a serious speaker, it would be weird of me to take my 20 minutes and take 10 of them and do a message in them. But I just did a Sunday morning service. I do about 5 or 6 of those a year at this point. And when I do that, I usually try to work in a message. And over the years, it's gotten a lot better because I work on it just like my material. I learned a lot about that. Some of the CCA stuff I remember, I remember Anita Renfro one time she spoke on a panel like this, and something she said really impacted me, and I still pray it before most of my shows. I try to pray this, and it's give me the spirit of Pentecost. And she said the miracle of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2 was not that everyone spoke in another language. It was that everyone in the crowd heard in their own language. And so that's comedy. So when we're preparing to do something, if it's a church and it's a very traditional church, I want to make sure that they hear me in their language today, God. So I'm praying that as I'm preparing. And I want to be myself, so I don't just go, I'm going to modify myself to be a super conservative, whatever this is, whatever town this is in, I'm going to pander to them. They can see through that too. But I do try to prepare my heart to for the people who are going to receive what I'm saying. So I don't ever want it to feel like this left turn. I was thinking today about this when I'm preparing some serious content. I want to make sure that any serious story I have is also got jokes in it. That's just my own standard. Now, everybody doesn't have that. I see people like Ken Davis where they can go into a serious thing and he's told a serious story where people are crying and you didn't know that he did it. Like you didn't know that he took that turn. I want to make sure that if I'm telling a story, it's my story, it's real, it has jokes in it, but it has a serious gut punch moment too. The analogy I was thinking today was I have a friend who's a hairstylist and there's this hairstyle called ombre. I don't know if it's even popular anymore. And it's it starts off one shade and at the bottom it's another shade. That's kind of how a comedian doing serious content should feel like that, where it's not this all of a sudden, oh man, he just got serious. He was telling jokes and now his dad's an abusive alcoholic. If it's that, the crowd is going to feel that knee jerk. And it's a little, like I said, crowds today are a little more cynical and they're looking, if they're in a church and you've dragged them to a church and maybe somebody told them it's a comedian this Sunday, it's not going to be like what you think. And then I do that thing where I just immediately take a left turn into raise your hands if you want to receive Jesus. If it goes straight to there, that's a real turnoff. And it makes me itch, so I can't do it. I have a really sensitive cheese meter. So if I feel cheesy on stage, I can't do it. So that's me. I try to be more ombre. I try to be I'm blending humor and I'm working in something serious and impactful that I want to say. It's important to have something impactful to say, and some comics just don't. And if you don't have something impactful to say, don't accept a serious content, don't accept that gig. Say, look, I just do comedy and I'll be that part of your service, but don't be I'll take whatever. It's like the actor that takes surfing lessons because that's part of the role. Yeah, I can surf. And then he goes and takes surfing lessons. Don't do that. You're hurting all of us when you do that. Have something to say. And if you have something that God said to you and it's an important part of your life or it's a testimony and you know that it's ready for stage, find a way to tell it in a funny way that also impacts people. So it's been a really work in progress for me, but it's to the point now where I really think it's strong,
Okay, I guess that's up to me. Well, I told you my name is Velva, and I just am a couple of vowels away from being named Velveeta. So I'm all about the cheese, and I do have a message. Now, I do not write a particular joke to have any kind of message to it, but because my comedy is about my story, and like Johnny said earlier when he first saw me, and I was talking about domestic violence and alcoholism and divorce, and people are cheering. It is kind of crazy that is what I talk about. But God has given me the grace to be able to introduce those topics with the diffuser of the hard left turn in the midst of those, and that actually. The first part of the hard part of my quote testimonial comedy was actually born when I got to go out with Shonda for several shows back when I first started in Christian comedy in 2015. Is she said, I want to make sure that my audience, because Shonda was long-term married and then her husband died and she became a widow. Christian marriage, Christian home, Christian woman her whole life. She said, I just want to make sure my audience understands that your divorce life is under the blood, that, that was before Jesus in your life. So if you can come up with a way to make that clear. And so that was a conversation earlier that day on the bus, and we're at a theater that night, and I get on stage and I'm like, I got nothing. I mean, I could not think of anything to turn that. And so I was just going to say, I'm not advocating for divorce somewhere at the end of my show. But I did the joke about, that I was divorced, that when I drank alcohol, I broke out in a bad marriage, and that happened twice. And they get real quiet. And I said, my line was, well, I got a hold of one that thought he was a boxer and that I was his punching bag. And then they were like, oh, and I was like, oh, it's fine. I killed him. That just came out of my mouth. And I was like, oh, I killed him. And then they applauded. I mean, they were like all uptight. And she's divorced. Why is she with Shonda? Oh, she murdered him. Bless her, Lord. She must have got out in 25. And he's already forgiven her. And so then when I wrapped it up at the end, I said, I wanted to be clear that I'm not advocating for divorce or murder like you people. And that's how that was born. And now it has morphed and grown. And because I do joke about things that are not funny, and most of everything that I do, it's either with Aspire or Marriage Date Night, which is a Christian tour company, or it's, on stage at women's events. They are looking for something of a message. That's how they justify the expense, to bring in. They're wanting a speaker, but they want a lot of humor and comedy or whatever. And so I wrap that up by saying, I know I joke about a lot of things that aren't funny. We've laughed tonight at alcoholism, divorce, and domestic violence. There's nothing funny about any of those things. But by the grace of God and the mercy of God and the forgiveness of God, I'm not laughing at any of those things. I can laugh in spite of them. Mm-hmm. And then they, and I'll pander all day long. I don't care, Johnny.
Whatever you're selling, I want some.
To you, honey. I know that the book of Leviticus, and it just lifts me and encourages me. Gnashing of teeth is my favorite. But I want to say this, because I know we got to wrap it up by 11 o'clock. We got pizza coming. David told me to keep it short, so I'm only going to go to 11. Because that's what I do, and I tell my recovery story through the comedy, and I always close with comedy, always close with at least trying to get a laugh. But because of that, I got so much of my identity. Years ago, my identity was wrapped up in I'm a comedian, and I had to have the laughter. I had to get the laughter in order to be okay. It was a survival tool as a kid. As long as people were laughing, nobody was screaming, nobody was yelling, nobody was on to daddy about his drinking. So I would make everybody laugh in the house. And then as an adult, and I became a comedian at 30 years old, then it was about me being okay because the audience is laughing at what I said. And therefore, I had to have the laughter, so I sold my soul to get it. And I would say anything to get you to laugh. I didn't care what it was. And then I got to the point in Christian comedy where I wanted to give laughter. Michael Jr. talked to us about that a few years ago, about giving the audience the opportunity to laugh. Mm-hmm. And asking the Holy Spirit in between the punchlines, like, what's next in this? But my identity then got caught up in the after the show, because women would come to me, men and women. I've been sober 25 years. I've been sober 15 years. I've been sober 3. My husband left me. My husband beat me. Some that were still living in it. Well, then that became my identity, that, I'm, go get my cape out of the cleaners. Here she comes to save the day. I'm out there doing the Lord's work, and these women are coming to me, and now COVID shuts it down, and I'm stuck here at home, and what do I do? And by the way, Taylor Mason, little tail kicking sermon that he just did, that was awesome. I got to get busy on the internet. But that became where I was looking to get fed, was from people telling me their stories. And in the midst of that identity crisis during COVID, the Lord spake unto me saying, if you are waiting to get back out there to get your identity in that, if you're waiting to get back out there to be fed and to be watered, you're going to starve to death and thirst to death right here in this house. Mm. And because that will never be what we do for him, will never even be where our identity belongs. It is belonged, rooted, grounded, seated right in the middle of him. So there's nothing, funny in that. And I'm not getting paid for this gig, so I don't have to close with a laugh.
Pass the plate. Is it time for the offering? Let's see.
I told you I'd pander. No, I needed to say that because these last 2 days have been like a revival for me as far as just, being filled up spiritually and recognizing that what it is that we do, we have to get creative. Like Rick said, we've got to still stay in the creative process. And like Taylor said, do whatever it is in order to do what we do. And so that's it for me. I just needed to share that little identity piece that, because I started putting my story in the comedy, I got to realize my story is meant for his glory, and I can't make that all about who I am. It's whose I am that matters. So
Preach.
Awesome.
Anyway.
Well, I guess we are going to bring up everybody. We're going to bring up David Pendleton right now. And I know, David, you wanted to bring in Mike and Brian as well.
Yeah, let's bring in Mike and Brian. I just want to say thank you to them for working behind the scenes. Both of them have been working really hard behind the scenes to pull this off and to handle all of the technical, back behind the scenes scenarios. So thank you so much for you guys. I just want to ask each of our panelists here. Great job, by the way, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing, talking about, your process, joke writing process, but then also I think bringing in ultimately, how do you tie that into a message? Because as believers, whether we are giving a message overtly from the stage or just by sharing our lives, as has been talked about, throughout these past couple of days, we have a message. We have something that we need to share with the world. I want to ask the three of you, what has been something that has particularly impacted you in these last couple of days as you have listened in to the sessions these past couple of days? And I understand that you might not have been able to be at all the sessions. That we totally understand that. No judgment. but those, what you have been able to experience, tell me what has impacted you.
I think just from watching yesterday and today and being part of it, what really just strikes me is I love this, that we did this, but we also need to remember that I think anybody that was on any of these calls or anybody that you met through CCA will pick up the phone and fill your cup a little bit if you need help with anything, whether it's writing or just somebody to lend an ear to the tough times that it is or whatever it might be. I'm just reassured by the attitude of everybody that spoke and everybody that was online making comments. It's a big group we're all over the country, different countries, some Canadians even.
Yeah.
There's somebody close to you physically, but if not, you can hit these StreamYards and Zooms and have little mini retreats or many hours once a month or something just to recharge your batteries. It was great yesterday just hearing. I got to listen to all of Jeff Allen's before I had to hop in the car and head back from the thing, but just to hear him share his beginning of his story, because I think a lot of people just know what he's doing now, didn't know that whole backstory, and so we've all got something like that, maybe not nearly as extreme or maybe deep testimonial, but we're all trying to figure something out. We're all broken people, but we all know that comedy fills in those cracks a little bit. So hit the message boards, share some contact information with each other, make some new friends on here, and just know that this is really what CCA is. I know it's a lot of things to different people, but I think it's people, like-minded people with a shared mission coming from a lot of different angles.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you so much. What about the rest of you? Johnny, Kay.
Hey, I loved Taylor today. Was so great. I think the thing I love about Taylor and then Dan Ruppel as well, like I've hung out with them and they've been doing this so long, and there's something about like what we claim we are as Christians and believers who do comedy, And when you see it lived out, it's so refreshing. When you see somebody who has every right to be like, oh, I've been doing this how many every years. Why am I not super famous or whatever it is? The bitterness you see in clubs
Yes.
or the competitiveness. And so when you see somebody like Dan, who is a true like trailblazer, and we're all standing on his shoulders, and he's done work in so many different fields of entertainment, and to see him, and I've hung out with him backstage at a Tim Hawkins show. He came and he was so like glowing about how he had just met me. Oh, you did such a great job. And he was talking about Tim. He was so fired up about Tim's new hour. This was several years ago. And he said, you started talking about his church, and he was still involved in his church. And I was like, I want to be this guy in 30 years.
Yeah.
Like, he still loves comedy. He loves God. He loves his family. He's not bitter against the church. He's not bitter about lost opportunities. Like, these people are like ambassadors, but they're also like, it's a walking like message of what could be. And so when I get a chance to hang around with somebody who's been doing comedy a long time and they're believers, I want to find out, like, what is your secret for not turning into a curmudgeon? You know? So I love that I can pick people's brains. That's one cool thing about this environment, is you can kind of pick people's brains and be like, what are your secrets? What are you doing? So I love it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, you are so right.
You know, it's amazing.
I'm so glad, by the way, Kay, not to interrupt you, but I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to share what you just shared at the very tail end there. Because I think you're exactly right, that sometimes what happens is that we will start to, it's a subtle thing, but we'll start to get our fulfillment from even our ministry, if you will, as if our ministry is what fills us up and brings us life. But even that is misplaced. I think that's an important message. It's very subtle, but it's an important message. But it has to be in the Lord, in Him alone, even not how He's using us. But it is in Him. And sometimes we lose sight of that. And when it's taken away from us, when we can't go out there during a pandemic and do what brings us life in ministry, then where are we deriving life? And if we find ourselves sinking into depression, and trust me, I can relate to this. Why is that? And it's actually something that's telling me that it's because I'm not bringing, my delight is not coming from the Lord. It's not coming from His word. It's not coming from my relationship with Him. It's even though those other things, ministry, all of that is a good thing. It needs to come from the Lord and from His word. So that was a good word. And as you can tell, I really resonated with that. So go ahead.
Well, thank you, David. Well, and Ken Davis, I think, said it, everybody's realness and rawness in what they've done and what they've shared the last couple of days has been such a blessing, because, and here's the thing, we thought, we were devastated when we had the conversation to have to cancel the face-to-face gathering, because that's, we got to be together in order to have fellowship. Well, in doing it this way, we've had, virtual fellowship, but everybody was able to be real and raw and vulnerable. There was no performance aspect to it. There's nobody, like Shonda said, handing out tapes. Nobody was trying to get work from anybody. It was truly ego completely aside, and just, here's what I've been through. Ken's vulnerability of sharing that he'd been out there preaching about a Jesus that he was ignoring, like he was not spending that one-on-one time. And I remember hearing James Robison say one time, he held up the Bible and he said, I could go to this book and find anything to feed you, but I wasn't being fed by it.
Oh, yes.
And I have found myself, and that's what God showed me, is like, you're sitting here starving to death because you're not partaking in this, for yourself. If you're just constantly looking, and it's the difference between worshiping the gift or worshiping the giver.
Yes.
And I went through a period of my life where truly had to trust God for every ounce of provision, and COVID, brought that again. And so do you worship the provision that's provided or the provider that gave it? But I think the biggest heart-piercing line that got me in these last 2 days was don't blame Jesus for me.
Mm-hmm.
What Jeff Allen said, if you followed me around right now, you might not see him, you might not smell that sweet fragrance, but please don't blame Jesus for me. Because we have all been, only some of us have been exposed to the virus, but we've all been exposed by the virus, because whatever's been in this cup, it's been bumped, and whatever was in it has been spilling out. Please don't blame Jesus for what you've seen in me. So that's it.
Yeah, really true. Well, guys, it is time to wrap up, but thank you so much. And I want to thank also, again, Rhonda and Leslie for stepping up and doing such a wonderful job. Your sweet spirits and your enthusiasm and everything that I knew would be true of the two of you. It's just been a delight to watch. So thank you for hosting us and doing such an excellent job with that. And thank you all for joining us. Don't forget, you can email us at info@christiancomedyassociation.org. Please check back to the website. That's going to be the place where we're going to try our best to disseminate information about upcoming events. There's been things suggested about maybe we should do this quarterly. Maybe we should, do this more. And I would agree. This has been a really great experience. So, all right. Kay, would you please close us in prayer?
Oh, I've been so spiritual. Thank you.
Thanks for
Heavenly Father, Lord God, thank you. We came together, and this committee has worked so hard. They worked so hard to put together the face-to-face, and then to have that rug slipped out from under. I felt the pain in that phone call. But God, we had to trust that we were planning our way, but we had to trust that you were ordering our footsteps, and you got each and every one of us out of your way in order for you to speak. And so thank you, God. Thank you to every one of the committee members, everybody that poured into anything to do with this, that they each allowed you to speak through them. And we just praise you and thank you. You have woven together in these 2 days a tapestry of grace that we could not have put together if we sat down with pen and paper night after night planning it. But you wove together this beautiful tapestry. And as we know, what we see on the front of a tapestry is beautiful art, and it's all finished and precious and priceless. But on the back is where all the action happened, all of the frayed, all of the cords that were cut and retied. And God, I just pray for rest for the people behind the scenes that have worked tirelessly these last 2 days to make all of this come together technically, and for all of the planning. And we just leave it in your hands as to what's next. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys.
God bless.